Minister Anuraag Thakur is warning that websites and YouTube channels that are anti-India will be blocked. I'm Barkha Dutt, you're with the Mojo story. This big development is our focus on the broadcast this evening. Let's take you through what we know so far. This warning is coming from the minister against anyone propagating fake news and working against the interests of India. We have seen recently that 20 anti-India websites and URLs thus identified by the Intelligence Bureau were in fact blocked in coordination with YouTube itself. These were found to be operating primarily out of Pakistan, and in a statement the government said that they were spreading fake news on issues ranging from Kashmir to the place of Indian Muslims and so on. The national security concerns, of course, are well taken and no Indian would disagree. But will the national security debate become a gateway to impose other restrictions in the digital space? That is a genuine concern. How do we actually define what or who is anti-India at a time when the phrase anti-national is such a politicized slogan? And where does the law come in on this? Also technology. In the age of VPNs, can you even really block anything at all? Let's introduce our panel on the program today. Aman Taneja, who's a senior associate with Ikigai joins us. We're also joined by lawyer Rahul Narayan. He's a key expert in this area. Welcome to the program. Akash Banerjee, who like us has a great presence on YouTube. And I was just going to say it's quite meta to be discussing YouTube on YouTube. Then I realized that meta is a whole different meaning now. So I stopped myself from making that corny joke and I'll leave the jokes to you, Akash. And also joining us from Singapore today is Anuraag Saxena, political analyst and also the founder of Data Reveals. Welcome, everybody. Let me start with you, Akash, because you're a sort of fellow colleague in the digital space. This is coming against the backdrop of a huge debate over the new proposed digital rules to monitor content online. But the 20 URLs, in fairness to the government, that have been blocked all operate out of Pakistan. No critic of the government, not even the people that the BJP loves to hate, have actually been blocked. So should this be seen as a free speech debate or should this be seen as a national security debate?
It's absolutely amazing how the government has very swiftly moved as far as curbing those YouTube channels that were coming across the border. So kudos to the government as far as that is concerned. It's a good step. The warning, I hope, should be taken by those who are trying to spread fake news, fake messages, and trying to divide the society. And let's get that whole part absolutely clear, that there are anti-state actors who have gone ahead and are trying to spread hate in the country. So they have been blocked. Barkha, just to add to that, what is the next level? I would say that there is a lot of difference of opinion in this country, which is absolutely okay. Mature democracies also have that. That's absolutely okay. What really gets my goat is seeing people sitting away in foreign lands in America and indulging in hate commentary in India. So I think the first thing that we have to do is stop people who have no business, not even perhaps the citizens of this country, sitting in faraway lands and trying to stoke communal passions. So that's something that I really hope that the information and broadcasting minister looks into. The second thing, Barkha, and that really is the crux of the worry. The information broadcasting minister is talking about anti-India channels, anti-hate channels, trying to foment problems. And yet we see these news channels day in and day out doing the stuff that they do, which have far more reach, Barkha, than your and my small little YouTube channels. And no action seems to have been taken there. You have had official demarches to being the press club, etc., etc. A lot of news channels have been asked to take footage down. Fake news has been proven, but we haven't ever seen any action there. There lies my problem. That before you come to YouTube, you have to take care of what is happening on the ground.
Akash, just repeat that last sentence. We lost you briefly there. Just repeat that last sentence.
Just last point being that while this is absolutely welcome, I would also hope that the information broadcasting minister takes into account the daily kind of poison that is going around in news channels. After having been proven, after having been forced to take down footage, there has been no action from the government against these channels. And I hope that there is action there before we, of course, come down to the issue of YouTube as well.
That's actually a great point, that prime time so often when it comes to television is actually hate mongering and anti India. And that actually takes us to the hub of this debate. While there are certainly very acceptable intelligence bureau, RAW driven parameters to identify what is anti India, after that level, you get into the realm of subjectivity. One man's nationalism is another woman's, lack of patriotism in the truest sense. Anurag, we're in a very subjective realm here. And I think nobody's going to have any disagreement with the 20 YouTube channels operating out of Pakistan that have been blocked. Great. But when we have a sweeping statement, a channel, a URL, a website, a YouTube channel promoting fake news or anti-India content, who's going to define this? How do we define this? How do we agree? How do we agree?
Good question, Barkha. Just quickly in terms of opening comments, I think, as Akash said, there are people on two sides of the debate. I am always wary of people that frame this as one of three things: of people that frame it as a freedom of expression debate, of people that frame it in the context of speculation that, hey, if the government is doing this today, it will do that tomorrow. So let's worry about that instead of discussing this. I'm also wary of people, especially content creators, who engage in sarcasm and speculation pretty much to monetize their YouTube channels. So I'm going to steer away from that. Right? Let's understand that this specific case is a national security issue. That's the context here. And if you would remember the April 2019, if I'm not wrong, the largest social media company in the world issued an official press release. They themselves said that, look, we've identified, I think it was 126 pages and profiles from Pakistan that were spreading fake news specifically about Kashmir. And this company issued them takedown notices. So we're a few years after social media companies themselves are recognizing how dangerous this kind of, let's say, cyber infiltration from not very friendly nations can be. So I hope we frame it as that. Now, we might not have the answers around who's going to frame, how do you figure out what is fake, what is not fake, is it an opinion, is it a fact, which is also why we run data reveals to empirically validate narratives that are built about India. So the mechanics of what needs to happen will evolve with time, especially because social media happens to be a moving target anyways. But having said that, the principle of it has its place, which is we do need to protect ourselves with what is now very, everyone agrees that cyber warfare is the fourth wave of warfare. And, we've seen it from the times of Hitler, how propaganda machines are a very intrinsic part of national security attacks. So I'm very glad that, in fact, I would say that India is reacting a tad bit too late, which all of us accuse this government of doing. Ki yaar, time pe karna tha, aap aaj kar rahe ho, but better late than never.
Okay. Akash, I'll just get a brief response from you that Anurag says that it would be actually, in a way, facetious to see this as anything but a national security context. That Mr. Thakur was referencing the blockage of 20 YouTube channels that were operating out of Pakistan. And to see this as a free speech debate is to conflate apples with oranges. Your brief response before I open this up for our two legal experts.
Barkha, I don't dare, go into the realm of theoretics. I'm a very practical person. We just see what we report. So I'm a small little reporter. What I see is that beyond national security, which is it, I don't think that somebody doing a YouTube channel in India, sitting in India, and threatening to hang Barkha Dutt and threatening to hang people who speak their mind is not national security. In my small little illiterate little brain, that is as much as national security, because people are trying to instigate violence, and nothing happened of that case. Even if you take a look at what is happening as far as the Sulli deals and bully thing, it was only after the whole bully buy thing exploded that Mumbai police got into action, then the Delhi police got into action, which it did not get into action earlier. So when you talk about national security, in my little illiterate mind, It is not only people sitting in Pakistan and trying to launch jihad into India. National security is as much as people within India trying to spoil the fragment and spoil and fragment the fabric of this nation by using social media tools, which, by the way, they have been very, very efficient in using.
Well, I'm glad you brought up the example both of the online auction of Muslim women as well as the YouTube channel that threatened death to some of us, including myself. It's been almost a year. There has been no action against the man who spewed not just hatred but incited violence. So that's an important conversation. That what happens internally is also a question of national security. Now let's listen in before we go to our two lawyers to what the minister actually said, and then we can have our lawyers come in and react to it.
ऐसी कोई भी वेबसाइट्स हैं, वेब पोर्टल्स हैं, कोई भी यूट्यूब पर ऐसे अकाउंट्स हैं जो भारत के खिलाफ षड्यंत्र रचते हैं, भारत को बांटने का प्रयास करते हैं, भारत के लोगों को गुमराह करके अफवाहें फैलाने का काम करते हैं, उनके खिलाफ हमने कार्रवाई करने के लिए कहा था। ऐसे 20 अकाउंट्स के नाम हमने दिए भी थे जो पड़ोसी देश से आते हैं, वहां से चलते हैं। और मुझे खुशी इस बात की है, दुनिया भर के बड़े बड़े देशों ने भी उसका संज्ञान लिया है। स्वयं यूट्यूब ने भी आगे आकर उनको बंद करने के लिए कार्रवाई की है। और भविष्य में भी ऐसा कोई भी अकाउंट होगा जो भारत के खिलाफ षड्यंत्र रच रहा होगा, झूठ फैला रहा होगा, समाज को बांटने का काम कर रहा होगा, ऐसे अकाउंट्स को बंद करने का काम किया जाए।
Okay, so let me first bring in Rahul. The context is clearly the blockage of 20 YouTube channels operating out of Pakistan, but it's that last comment that has triggered the larger debate that Bhavishya may be going forward as well. Anyone found to be working against the interests of India or being indulging in fake news will be blocked. Now, both fake news and unfortunately who is for and anti-India have come to be really, really politically contested ideas internally. I think none of us have any disagreement with the external context, so I actually don't want to spend even 2 minutes debating it. I think if anyone can, establish that there is a group or groups of people in any external country operating against India, we'll all be standing up and saying, yay, block them, do the most you can. Internally, how do we proceed? These are Indian citizens often that we're talking about. There are free speech dimensions to this debate. Rahul, I'll start with you. Go ahead.
Well, the easiest way to think about this is that we look at the constitutional protections, that is Article 19(2), which is the exceptions to free speech. I don't think that the right to censor, for lack of a better word, the right to censor should probably extend to the same level which exists in the constitution, and not even a little bit more. Now, even for example, the glimpses you've been showing us, some of the stuff may certainly need to be banned. But I just saw one headline which said that Kim Jong-il is sending an army to Ayodhya. Now, I don't think that is a national security issue. It sounds a bit like a joke. I mean, I'm sure the website is not real. This, for example, 300 Indian spies hung by the Afghan Taliban. This may clearly damage something that's bad, but not this one exactly.
Yeah.
Kim Jong-un to send an army in Ayodhya. Now, this kind of news, I mean, fake news, obviously, this is nonsensical and idiotic. So, my fear is my only issue with this entire thing is that this has been blocked under emergency rules without any right to be heard. Okay, now in my mind, for emergency
But why do we care about, honestly, not to be politically incorrect here, but I really don't give that much of a damn about this gentleman or lady who has created this meme, if it was a meme. I care much more about the rights of my citizens, my fellow countrymen and women. I don't care. Maybe this is an overreaction. Maybe no one understood the sarcasm. Maybe they thought the image of the Babri Masjid now to be a Ram Mandir could stoke something. Maybe. But what is really concerning you? What do you mean by emergency rules? Can you define that?
No, what I'm trying to say is that from what I understand, this has been blocked under Rule 16 of the new IT rules, which means that this is done, these powers are exercised by the designated authority as without, they have to be done immediately. So if somebody decides that, okay, this has to be blocked now, without following any process of law, they're blocked immediately. Now, in my mind, this kind of power should be exercised when there is, for example, say there is some spy secrets have been stolen, or somebody is about to reveal some kind of war plans, then you use this. If it is not that, or if it is not hate speech which is about to incite a riot, or a goli maro salon ko moment when there is a big riot, a big movement somewhere, okay, that kind of thing, you stop it immediately using the emergency powers. But if it is just random stuff like Kim Jong-un is going to send an army to Ayodhya, why don't you follow the normal rules and just issue a notice to YouTube. YouTube is going to say this is crap. We'll take it down, and it'll get taken down. Maybe
It's a
it won't get
very
taken down immediately,
interesting
but maybe
point.
in 48 hours.
Yeah, can I just maybe recap what you're saying? You're saying that there's an emergency provision in the law, and it should be used sparingly, and it's not a great precedent to use it for things that could be tackled through the routine. Would that be a good summary,
Absolutely right.
Rahul?
That's a much better summary than what I have said. But yeah, that's exactly what I mean. Thank you.
Okay, so let me get Aman to add to this. Aman, in the sort of legal area, you have the broader new proposed digital content guidelines that are now in court, different courts being challenged. I'm not sure that any court would look at a national security question in the same way, but as Akash is arguing and Anuraag is disagreeing, there is a chance to use the national security debate as some sort of gateway to maybe use dimensions or provisions of the law that are strictly not needed, and then those could be applied in a domestic context. What are your concerns or thoughts, Aman?
Sure. Thanks for that question, Barkha. And just coming back to sort of the larger framing of this question, as in who decides what's anti-India, right? And how do you get about issuing these orders? I think the rules that Rahul is referring to, the Rule 16, all of these trace themselves back to Section 69A of the Information Technology Act, right? Which has fairly narrowly defined categories of information which can be blocked under this. And if I'm allowed to read from there, so it's in interest of sovereignty and integrity of India, defense of India, security of state, friendly relations with foreign states, or public order, and that's fairly broadly worded, right? Public order being one of them, or for preventing the incitement of commission of any of these offences. So there is a legal framework which is at play, which any orders which are passed under this have to be tested against that touchstone. So it's not as though it's the Wild West. There are certain checks and balances built into these rules. In fact, the Rule 16 and these rules which have come on from the new, the only change that's happened is these blocking rules existed earlier as well. That was under the IT Act per se, and the IT Ministry was the one running them, right? The one change that's come post this is now the MIB also has a say, and it mirrors the provisions of what was already there, and it had the same sort of process. There's a review committee which looks at this post blocking. So there are checks and balances in the law. One issue that people have often had with this entire process is that there is a little bit of lack of transparency. At least for the IT Act rules, the rules themselves say whatever happens here stays confidential. So whether you're able to challenge any orders taken under that, whether you can go to court saying that there's been a misuse of those powers, is a bit of an issue that in fact is currently being litigated as well. There was this case of a satirical website called Dowry Calculator which got taken down under those provisions, and they're in court right now trying to challenge that confidentiality rule, actually, which takes away some of the transparency. So bringing in more transparency could actually solve for bring in some more checks and balances to the system, so that these rules are
unlike Rahul, Aman, you believe the checks and balances are there. You just like the government to communicate a little more clearly why something is considered a threat to sovereignty, but you don't believe that the use of the emergency provisions itself is problematic.
In this case, the sort of content, apart from the example that maybe Rahul brought in, but if it's anything, and looking at a snippet of the headlines or just one thumbnail of that clip might not give you full context as what was in it, right? And if it was insightful, if it was provoking people to, and it could impact friendly relations with foreign states as well, right? Like saying that Kim Jong-un is releasing his army. So it is in those grounds. Now, and today it's blocked, so we can't see and judge for ourselves whether it was correct or not. We do have to give benefit of the doubt at some point. But I agree with Rahul in that emergency powers should be used sparingly, right? And it should not become the norm to use them, go through the system, have these interdepartmental committees which are supposed to look at this. In fact, even this order in 2 months, there's a 2-month period within which this has to be reviewed by a review committee, which is also a committee, which is the same committee which looks at, sorry, go ahead.
No. I'm just saying that it's useful to know that you believe that there are enough sort of checks and balances built into the system, and that there will be a review even of these decisions. Before I go back to Akash and Anurag, Rahul, if you want to add to that, because you're concerned that this is a kind of OTT reaction, a kind of over-the-top reaction that was not needed. I'm trying to be like Akash here and be very clever in my metaphors of meta and OTT and failing spectacularly. But go ahead, Rahul.
No, no.
Go ahead,
See,
Rahul.
I mean, I tend to agree with Aman to a large extent. That of course there are some checks and balances which are clearly specified. I mean, one can't miss them. But as far as, I mean, maybe I am reading it incorrectly. But as far as I can see from the review, the review committee doesn't review the entire decision. It just reviews whether it complies with the requirements of 69A or not. That is a sort of like somebody will take a look at the decision again. So the fact is that the Supreme Court has now held in the Pegasus reference case where they referred Pegasus to that committee that national security also cannot be a incantation. You have to be able to establish it to some extent. So obviously, you and I sitting over here looking at the headlines can't determine whether or not something is national security or not. But the point is, somebody other than the government should be looking at that as well. I think
I
that one of
think
our
that's the hub of the
maybe
debate. I think that's
maybe one
where
of
the debate is. Yeah, who decides? Not maybe Anurag more than what is anti-India. There is a question of who decides what is anti-India. And I think what I'm hearing Rahul say is that maybe there are checks and balances within the law, as Aman is arguing, but the interpretation of the law is entirely, if it's entirely left to government, then would the government not be tempted to act against those it does not like? Which is why we have this raging debate, for instance, around the new proposed digital content guidelines. Anurag, go ahead.
You see, Barkha, we have the blessing and the luxury of living in a country in the world's largest democracy, where there are enough checks and balances between various arms of the government. Right? I think the big question here is, look, there are four segments that we're talking about, and we might be conflating them, right? There's cross-border national security issues. There's domestic national security issues. There's cyber threats like you've received. There's other action like libel and slander and defamation. Right now, there are different laws to deal with each. Now, given that A and B are relatively new and evolving, we will get to specific answers with time. And guess what? Once we get to that answer, there is a new variant of a national security threat we'll face, perhaps in the metaverse or something like that. And then law will play catch up to that. And, we all know how effective our policymakers and bureaucrats are in terms of catching up. I think the approach that I really like on this is the American approach, not just specifically, the Regulation 24 in California, but the way the congressional hearings are conducted. They're very open, they're very transparent, they're very specific. And people are, companies are made very publicly accountable for decisions that they take. So I hope we can, and again, I think everyone in this panel agrees that this has to be a more collaborative kind of an approach. Honestly, nobody knows what the right answer is. Nobody knows who decides. Is it an independent panel? Is it a part of MIT? Is it a parliamentary panel that Shashi Tharoor heads? I don't know what the answer is. I think we first have to agree on the principle and then build mechanics to deliver on that principle. The challenge right now is we've not agreed on the principle as a nation.
I think the American parallel, though, Akash, is a great two things actually to learn from the Americans on this. One is, they're as sort of wedded to their First Amendment as they are to the Second Amendment. We may find the Second Amendment somewhat loopy, which is about gun carrying and weapon owning rights, but they really are committed across party lines to that First Amendment, which is free speech. We do not have that historic culture. It could be argued that we also have many other sort of problems, law and order dimensions, frailties in our social fabric, and so on. But Anurag's reference to these on-record, open-camera congressional hearings as a solution, where you have multi-party, bipartisan sort of hearings where perhaps YouTube would or Meta or whoever, WhatsApp would be asked to appear before sort of multi-party panels, and the people of India could watch those hearings and input into them. Is that a start? Why are you smiling already? Why are you smiling? Tell me.
Call me negative, Barkha. I mean, congressional hearings, Senate committees sounds very delicious. We are sitting in a situation where, leave alone free speech, we are talking about the survival of speech at this point of time. And badger me for being negative about this. Rahul was just saying that we can't use national security as an incantation. And I couldn't just prevent myself from laughing, because that is exactly what everything is at this point of time. It is an incantation. I would be very happy if anti-national channels are shut down. Anybody who's trying to split this nation is shut down. That's absolutely great. But then I'm reminded of this small little thing called the UAPA, which was supposed to do the same thing in the physical world. And guess what? Today, UAPA has become of a bit of a joke, because you want to take a leak, you might get a UAPA. You want to say a line, you might get it's become a joke. Look at your comment sections, Barkha, after you do an episode. And you will find कि अरे तुम्हारे ऊपर भी UAPA हो जाएगा. That is what we have reduced national security to a joke, to be misused and throw people behind bars for a year without even a bail. Now, correct me, Rahul and Aman, if I'm wrong. This is the situation where this bill might be misused. And please tell me if I'm wrong. Say tomorrow Barkha has a guest and she's doing a debate, and the guest says something which is a little bit maybe defamatory, maybe a little anti-national, depends. It's a gray line. The government would be within its rights to immediately shut down Barkha's entire channel without even asking an explanation from Barkha. Rahul and Aman, am I right or am I wrong? If the emergency powers are to be used, they might be used in this definition.
Let's start with you, Aman, if you want to respond to that, and then Rahul.
Sure. One, I think that's a little speculative, so wouldn't want to go out too much on a limb here. But and again, defamatory content is not something which is covered by these powers, right? This is like defamation is not a ground under 69.
But let's say there was a separatist, a Kashmiri separatist, or someone who supported a separatist. I'm actually trying to think of scenarios that do exist in the process of journalistic pursuits. You may come across somebody. Even in mainstream politics, we think they're mainstream politics. Farooq Abdullah, you're interviewing Farooq Abdullah. He suddenly says something outlandish, as he often does, about हमें तो जी आजादी ही चाहिए, इससे तो better आजादी है, इससे तो better China है. I'm quoting an actual interview. He has said things like this. It's on Mojo Story. What happens then? I'm actually painting not a very hypothetical scenario. I'm painting a very, very plausible picture for you.
Sure. So I'll answer.
I think it's national security. If Bhakt Banerjee is to think it's national security, yes.
Sorry, Akash, you think if Farooq Abdullah said that, it would be?
Yeah, I am saying from my perspective as Bhakt Banerjee, it's anti-national. How dare he say something like that? And you cannot, Barkha, if somebody is going to clamor onto you and say that, how can you ever defend something like this on your channel? You won't be, maybe. Now, my question is, under the emergency power, and yes, Aman, yes, Rahul, hypothetical situation. But given the fact that we've had the Kashmir Press Club just closed down, which was a little hypothetical 2 days ago,
sure.
Let's talk hypothetical.
Okay, let them respond now. Go ahead, Aman.
Yeah. So, interestingly, if you follow the normal procedure, which is the normal blocking route, etc., there is a very clear rule there which says that a direction under this rule can be issued only in respect of a specific piece of content or an enumerated list of content, and not require you to cease your operations entirely, right? So to answer your question, will Mojo Story entirely be blocked? Ideally, it shouldn't. It should be for that one video which they believe. Under the emergency powers, it's not as clear, right? It then becomes a question of interpretation whether that procedure should get read into when you're doing a Rule 16. Ideally, that's how it should happen. And when I talk about checks and balances, really, at some level, we do have to trust or hope that we are able to go to court with when there is a misuse of these powers, right? And that, I think, is really where a lot of this gets stuck, is that we have an overworked judiciary. It's not really possible. I think a point Anuraag was making earlier is there is a lot of subjectivity in these things. In an ideal world, you want more transparency. You maybe want judicial minds applied to a lot of these questions. Practically, do we have the resources to be able to do that, to police the sheer amount of content that we have on the internet? I'm not sure, which is why this becomes a lot harder. Which is why I think...
Actually, we haven't spoken about the technological dimension of this. We've spoken about the bureaucratic dimension. We've spoken about, the free speech debate. But anyone with a VPN can actually work around any blockage. So that's also something to remember. And also, by the time content goes viral, you can't actually take it back. And to that extent, I actually think it's not at all misplaced to make big tech more than content creators answerable for fake news, but maybe I'm wading into a controversial area here. Rahul, go ahead.
I completely, I was about to make the same point Aman was making, that under normal rules, you can't block the channel as a whole, although probably under emergency, I suspect you probably can. That is one big problem with the emergency provision. In my opinion, they should limit the operation of this in that case. Maybe you limit it to a few weeks or something like that, unless you take criminal action as well. Now, if for example they just want to shut you down and they don't take any criminal action against you, it's perfectly clear that you haven't been the anti-national person at all, right? In which case, there is no reason for you to be shut forever. So I should
Yeah.
imagine that should be the case. And again, like Aman was suggesting, and perhaps what Akash was saying as well, each incident of the exercise of this power, if it has been done to you, you should be able to challenge it in court, subject to the weirdness of the confidentiality thing. If you go to the court and say that this is disproportionate, that is a very useful new sort of new thing which came into the our law in the Puttaswamy judgment about the right to privacy case.
Yeah.
Any violation of the law, any violation of your rights has to be proportionate to the offense. It can't be, you don't use a nuclear weapon where you can get by using a pistol. So therefore,
But the
to
fact
ban everything.
Yeah, the fact though is that we've had stand-up comics go to jail and come out on bail and then not necessarily be able to go to work. You've had the Supreme Court needing to intervene. A lot of times, your lower courts are certainly not making those interventions, and that's why I guess some amount of sort of fading cynicism that the process might become the punishment. Let's take last
The
comments.
process
We'll
is the
start with you.
punishment.
Sorry, the process is the punishment. Yes, Anurag, you wanted to come in? Go ahead, Anurag.
Yes, quick closing comments, Barkha. Let's pan back from the speculation and the fear mongering that this topic, and I understand it's very tempting to go down that path, right? Again, I refer back to the April 2019 uh, announcement by the world's largest social media company. In one fell swoop, sorry, they shut down, I think, it's been a while, but I think it was some 620 or 680 pages, groups, profiles, 680. Now compare that to 20 channels that are being shut down today with a very specifically identified, documented, and transparently declared reason why it is happening. Now you might not like that reason, you might not agree with it. You might want to speculate, oh, this is, this is, you're foreboding something else that's going to happen. But many years back, we've had big tech themselves remove 680 pages, groups, profiles, etc., and we have a nation today taking a decision to shut down 20. So let's just understand the scale here, and let's not make it bigger than it is, as tempting as our need to speculate is. That would be my only submission here, Barkha.
Fair enough. Let me take that to Akash. Akash, I'm reminded from Anurag's comments of a recent contentious decision by Twitter to take Donald Trump or to silence him temporarily when he was accused of propagating fake news during the US presidential elections. And even some liberal friends thought that was wrong. It set a bad precedent for actually being able to sort of say that free speech has to be absolute. Akash, your last thoughts, and I think you're on mute. No, you're not. Go ahead. Yeah.
Very quickly, if you just go by the whole fact of facts are facts. I know in today's day facts are not facts, and we intellectualize about everything. But if facts are facts, if a death threat to you to hang you is not a legally something that should get somebody into jail, we do have a problem. Yes, social media companies have to do more. And I do agree on the fact that social media companies have been getting away with a lot of it, because one has to realize that social media companies thrive on this hatred. We have to make social media companies, governments, citizens have to force social media companies to stop profiting from hate. Same goes with news channels. Unless and until that happens, you will see this proliferation go on, because the volume is too great. Examples need to be made. And unfortunately, on the other side, instead of this happening, what we are seeing is voices being silenced. I just hope that the law is used in its spirit, and we don't have to go into the technicalities and hope that there is legal recourse and things would be looked into, etc.
Okay, Aman, you said that there are enough checks and balances, but the interpretation, the fear rests with governments. And by the way, this can be any party. I was just looking at the response of an RTI application, and if we can bring that banner up, it actually shows you close to 15,000. There it is. 9,000 URLs were blocked in 2020. That's up sorry, now I missed that. You need to go to the previous one. So let me just do a comparison. The RTI application tells you that nearly 50,000 URLs were blocked between 2010 to 2018. This is a period that straddles both the Congress and the BJP government. So I just thought this was an important figure to actually show that this, give any government the power to go after content, and possibly it will. Aman, your thoughts?
Sure.
Although you're seeing a big spike in the URLs blocked since 2019, but that's again BJP to BJP. So I just thought that those two figures were interesting. Yeah, Aman, go ahead.
I mean, those figures could also be a result of just the sheer explosion of the number of users. I mean, let's without getting into that.
Absolutely.
Without getting into that, I think what we really need to think about in terms of sort of regulatory design, and we're solving problems which are live, right? Like these are having every day. When Twitter blocks Donald Trump, it's happening for reasons. It's the first time something like that has ever happened.
Yeah.
What we really, and I think this is an expectation as users and citizens we would have both with big tech platforms and with governments, is to act transparently, right? Let us know why you are doing what you're doing. And I think that would be the biggest sort of safeguard that can be built into any system. And that's been a criticism of the blocking rules in the past. In this particular instance, there was a lot more transparency. I think if you remember, the same provisions were used to block Chinese apps. I mean, the same sort of logic about a couple of years ago. At which point there was a lot less said about what really was the issue, right? So bringing in that transparency, and if the rules can codify that in some way, shape, or form, would actually be the solution. That it's a starting point to then really have a slightly more intelligent debate around what really should be done, who should.
Actually, that's a great point, that when the Chinese apps were blocked, everybody knew exactly the backdrop against which they were blocked, why they were blocked, that it was actually an instrument of state policy against an adversary whose army was clashing with ours in the high Himalayas, and nobody saw it as a free speech issue. So that's a very, very important point, the messaging around it, the transparency, the communication. Rahul, last word to you.
Tell you quickly what the problem in this entire area has historically been. Normally, when it comes to big companies, like say, for example, you have consumer laws, and you have things like the former MRTP or the current Competition Commission to protect the state protects us from big companies, right? That is the first way to look at it. The second way, as regards free speech, etc., is concerned, companies protect us from the state, right? Now you see what the problem with something like misinformation and free speech issues is. Who protects us from whom? Yeah. In a scenario like this, I think the person who's actually being, to put it politely, maybe sometimes even shafted at the end, is the individual consumer. If the two big Maharajas of our life combine with each other and both decide that it is in our best interest to collaborate with each other, who's going to take care of us and who's going to protect us? I think that is if we ever find an answer to the reason why everybody in constitutional law is constantly differing between one position or the other, one extreme or the other, and this is because of this position. We are finding it very difficult to reconcile this. At least I am finding it almost impossible to. So we have to be. I mean, I understand you can't be subjective about this, but the simple truth is this: that we need to find some way for citizens to get empowered. The answer is citizens' rights. And
I think that's such a great point. And I can see everybody agreeing, despite the somewhat some areas of disagreement in this program. Everybody, we all are nodding along with you. Big tech, big government, in between individual rights of the citizen who doesn't have access to big resources. I think that is where we have to underline the direction of this debate. Thank you, Rahul, Aman, Anuraag, and Akash, and see you to our audience tomorrow, same time, same place. Great panel, learned a lot. Thanks, guys. Thank you for watching. See you tomorrow. Goodbye. It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalism.